Are you ready?
Well, hello, everybody. This is the Parishscope. This is the podcast that functions as an arm for the newsletter, the Parishscope, which we have at St. John San Prairie. I am Pastor Chris Sansom.
And I'm Casey Dreamus. I'm the creative worship director at Our Savior Lutheran.
And my voice is still not quite 100%. Yeah, it was like going downhill last week, so I didn't record. Trying to save it as best I could. And it seems to be in the recovery stage, but it's definitely taken forever, as it normally does for me anyway. Yeah. So that's why we didn't record last week. Feels like there's always something, but anyway, so yeah, like that's why we took the week off. I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't know about next week, being Holy Week and all.
Might be a bit busy.
Yeah, it might be a bit busy. So we'll have to see how that goes. But there's that too. Other big news this week. We got and we were just talking about this right before we came on, and I don't know how many people did not know that you were not technically a member of an LCMS church.
Yeah.
Whenever you play music, I think a lot of people kind of just assume that you're a member of an LCMS church.
Right.
And actually part of the reason that we started this podcast was basically because you weren't an LCMS Lutheran. You had great questions. I remember we used to talk on Wednesdays right before church service, and you just always had some great questions from an outsider's kind of perspective. And I always appreciated those conversations, and that was kind of what sparked this podcast.
Yeah.
But we had some big news took place this weekend, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, me and my family all became members of Our Savior Lutheran, and so the LCMS church. And we also, my kids, all three of my kids got baptized, and my wife has never actually been baptized, so she got baptized as well. So it's very exciting.
It is very exciting.
Yeah. To finally just officially become a member. So
yeah. No, that is so exciting. I again, this has just been, for me anyway, kind of like always kind of wondering, like, what were you going to do? And, I didn't know, and, and I'm not going to be rude and try to ask like every 5 seconds, but I have been curious. And so this is kind of an answer to that. And, while I've always said that, like, I'm just happy when people go to church, especially a Christian church. And, while I disagree with, like the Baptist down the road or the Catholic up the road or whatever it happens to be, they're still Christian groups, and they're still Christian church, even though I do disagree with them.
Right.
And so it was always kind of one of those things like, well, maybe you'll join, one of those churches. Of course, then again, I was like, well, how are you going to go to church on Sunday? You're always
right.
You're working, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they had an evening service or something,
that does put a it makes it hard. Yeah. I mean, it's been, there's a couple things that I think kind of held me back for a while about it.
Sure.
One being that when you are working for a church, and I think, I don't know if it's different for pastors as it is just someone who's involved in music, but when you work for a church, there is a little bit of a feeling of, I don't want to join a church. Then let's say something happens, I get let go. It feels kind of disingenuous because I'm probably not going to keep going to that church if I was fired, like it'd be a weird thing to work for a company, be fired, and then be like, well, I promised I was going to come in every day, so I guess I'm just going to keep coming even though you're not paying me. You know what I mean? So that's kind of a bit of the turmoil of, do you join or not join? And that's a discussion. I'm on a couple Facebook groups of worship leaders, and that's a pretty big discussion amongst a lot of people. And it's pretty polarizing as far as who believes what. Some people are really adamant about you should join the church. Other people are really adamant about you should never, ever join the church that you work at. So I mean, they're in just for like the reason I said, they just feel like, well, it's not really genuine to join a church that you may quit because of a job opportunity or whatever it may be. And so I do understand that. And also, when you grow up in a non-denominational church, denominations are kind of like they seem kind of scary to you a little bit, like,
I can get that.
because
I do.
because and you don't really know anything about them, but you just kind of view it as, I mean, I don't know. It's a weird thing. I don't know if it's superiority is really the right uh, way to say it, but you do have a sense of you kind of have it the right way, because we do study the Bible, and we read the Bible, we go through it, and so there's a little bit of a feeling of, well, we don't need like a organization for us to study the Bible, which I think is true, but there is something, like, now that I've been around it, I understand more of the things that I thought were maybe off-putting aren't really that off-putting, but I thought they were at the time, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. So
Well,
I
and
think
again,
that's part of it.
yeah, I kind of get that because, like I've always said, and I got a cousin that's a preacher at a non-denominational church, and I've talked to him in the past, and and he's a good guy. He's a good guy. I don't have bad words to say about him, even though I disagree with him on certain things. I don't have bad things to say about him. He's a good guy. Um, but part of our discussions are always like, like some of the positives that he has that are negatives to me, and some of the negatives and some of the things that are really positives for me are really negative for him. And the example I always use is like, culture shifts, and it shifts at lightning speed. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and there's certain things that you want to try, and there's certain things that you want to do, and a denominational affiliation can really put a damper on some of that. You
Yeah.
can't move quite as fast as you would like. There's a lot of history there. There's a lot of culture there. There's a lot of traditions there, and sometimes you just can't move quite as fast as you would like to. And the non-denominational churches, they can mobilize instantly. Like as long as the elders and whoever's in their upper echelons of their church, as long as they're all in agreement, they can go for it. And
Yeah.
that's what they'll do. They'll just jump, go.
Yeah.
And so they can mobilize and move and do things a lot quicker and faster. And that's a huge plus. I mean, that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge plus. But on the flip side of that is the fact that, like, if they screw up doctrinally, there's nobody there. There's no safety net. There's
Mm-hmm.
nobody that's going to come in and yell at them. Okay,
Right.
so maybe one of the members picks up, like, but it's like, and again, I hate to say this, but like, if you're a member of a church and you go yell at the pastor, if you have a really good point, I hope he listens. But honestly, and this is one of those things, like, just being a pastor for a while is like every now and again, you're going to ruffle somebody's feathers,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't do it intentionally. You don't want to. And sometimes you do have to take a step back and go, okay, I really messed up here. But honestly, like I could see somebody who's in a position who says, okay, well, I ruffled somebody's feathers. They'll get over it, you know?
Oh
And in
yeah.
fact, I've actually read books where they flat out say like, hey, you're going to ruffle people's feathers. They'll get over it. And,
Yeah.
and it is like, it's like, okay, well, let's not say that immediately. Like, let's take a step back and actually say like, what did we ruffle their feathers about? And do they have a point, or are they
Mm-hmm.
just offended? And, so you got to be a little cautious with that.
Oh yeah.
But that's what I mean. Like, so a denominational preacher, if he goes off on the deep ends, okay, so he might have a member or two. But as long as their front door is bigger than their back door, that is, as long as they're gaining members quicker and faster than what they're losing them, then everything is okay. And
Yeah.
that's the way the church leadership tends to look at it. Not all of them, and not always, but that's the way it tends to be. And
Well,
so,
yeah.
and on the other hand, with the LCMS church, it's like, oh boy, howdy. If I screw up, like I there's consequences.
Yeah. There's someone you have to answer to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that is true. And as I've gone through being at an LCMS church, the church I grew up in, I've talked about it a lot of times on the podcast and stuff, but you know, one of the things that was kind of interesting about it is like our head pastor, our youth minister, and our worship leader were all coming from completely different backgrounds of Christianity, like different denominations, different,
Yeah.
upbringings,
Yeah.
which causes, I mean, at least like with the LCMS church, you do have a definite, what you're getting, because,
No, it's true.
not that everybody doesn't know, but they, there is a specific, like, you guys go through doctrine together and figure out what exactly you're discussing and what you're saying. And I'm sure there's some people who maybe go off a little bit on certain things, maybe certain ways, but for the most
Oh, yeah.
part, it's pretty unanimous of what you guys are preaching. With our church, there really wasn't a lot of, like, our worship leader was, he really didn't have much of a stance on anything. It was kind of like, well, do you believe that, you could ask him, like, do you believe evolution's real? And he'd be like, it doesn't matter. And he'd be like, all right,
Nope.
well, do you believe this? What do you believe? Like, like, you might talk about like abortion or something. He'd be like, well, I don't really see, and he just didn't really have a stance on anything. And so it was a weird, like, what are you standing for?
Yeah.
And yeah, so, and I think you were saying about how, like, your cousin, right, who's a pastor.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is, if you have somebody in a non-denominational church who is truly altruistic, or at least is very, very good at keeping their own desires kind of on the back burner and putting his church above his own needs,
Yeah.
they will do it. They will be great, but the problem is that you have some people, they have a really hard time
Oh, for sure.
not doing that. And you can see, I mean, there's been some churches recently in the area. There was a church recently in the area who had a whole scandal and everything. And I mean, of course, that can happen at any church, but there is a there is a procedure that happens. There is like a structure and an organization to like fix that. When at a church that doesn't have that and something happens, they typically close because they don't really have any, group there to help them or figure
Yeah.
out how to move forward. So I don't know. It's very interesting. And so it's funny because a lot of those things I grew up with, and all the problems I saw in the church, I'm like seeing now, oh, maybe that's because we didn't have any structure. Like,
Yeah.
I'm starting to
Yeah.
see like all those things I was mad about or didn't like, that, the things I thought were so great about the non-denominational church, maybe there's some issues there. And I also just feel like I'm now that I'm bringing my kids are old enough that I can kind of start bringing them, they can start going to Sunday school and they can be involved in VBS and do stuff. It's really, I don't want to be, the parent who's like, well, we go to this church, but like, we don't really like, we're kind of in it, but we're not fully like, we just need, I'm like, we just need to go in like
Yeah.
100%. Our kids need to grow up in a church that they get to actually, they do confirmation, they do all the things. And it's not some sort of like, well, yeah, we'll do confirmation, but like, I don't, like, don't take it
Yeah.
that serious or anything. Like, I'm not going to do that. So it's very much, I'm like, let's dive in and experience this for everything we can, so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, welcome. Welcome to
Thank
the
you.
LCMS.
Yeah, I can officially start making Lutheran jokes about myself.
Oh, man.
So
You just joined for the jokes.
yeah, that's all I got. That's all I came in for, so I could make
That's
jokes
right.
about
That's right. You
Lutherans,
just wanted to make
and
the
then be
joke.
like, "But I'm one of them. It's okay."
Yeah. Yeah. I'm okay. Yeah. How
Yeah,
many Lutherans does it take a light bulb? That's
yeah,
for the committee to decide.
yeah.
Don't worry. I'm a Lutheran. I can do that. I can say that
Yes,
joke.
I could do that. I don't know. I don't think maybe I told this on a podcast, but this church, Our Savior Lutheran, is the church my mom went to and my grandparents were at.
Yeah.
So it is kind of a special, crazy sort of serendipitous thing that I'm at this church, and then also, oh my gosh, my mind's going. Oh, my wife's grandma, when we first got married and we weren't really going to a specific church or anything yet,
Yeah.
before she passed away, she beat hospice, by the way. She's one of those people who they sent her to hospice and then they were like, you got to take her home. Like, I don't know, she's not dying. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And so, but she beat hospice at one point, but she prayed that we would go to a Missouri Synod Lutheran church, not just a church or I want you to go to church. It was a very specific, I want you to go to a Missouri Synod Lutheran church. And
That's
she
right. Keeping
prayed
it
about
real.
it a lot.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so we're kind of like, my goodness, look at that. It worked. Gladys did it. She did it, you know? She prayed hard
Gladys
enough
did
and
it.
it happened. So,
Gladys did it.
yep.
Oh man. See that should be the name of a segment. And Gladys did it.
And
That's
Gladys
right,
did it. Yeah.
everybody. And Gladys did it.
Yeah.
Mm. Oh man. I've been drinking a lot of tea lately, and I have to admit I love peppermint.
Yes.
I don't know why or what it is I have, but I bought so if you were to come into my house, like, and I'd open these doors, like, I have almost like an apothecary. Like, I just have
Ooh.
yeah, I mean, like, whenever I say I got into tea, and this is, and honestly, this is just exactly how I am, right? Like
Uh-huh.
I don't just like go, oh, well, that's interesting. Maybe I'll pick up some of that. No, it's like I'm gonna go on all in, like,
Of course.
you know.
You
So I
do.
got out mason jars. I got the labeler out.
Oh,
I labeled all the jars. They're all in a big wall,
yeah.
So it's like I can make my own blends now and all this kind of stuff. And
Nice.
so I'm over here and I'm drinking tea. I don't have a video or anything, but like I'm drinking tea because it's night and I like warm tea at night. And I have peppermint, and I put a lot of it in because I just love peppermint.
Yeah.
So anyway, supposedly it's supposed to clean your sinuses, and yeah, I can need that. My
Oh,
voice
yeah.
is awful. But yeah, no, it's not just peppermint. I've also put chamomile, lavender, and a few other things in there.
Oh, wow. You really do
Um,
have a apothecary.
oh yeah. Well, the funny one is like you look up some of these things, and like, so one of the things that I put in my tea is Tulsi, or it's sometimes called holy basil.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at this stuff, and it's like, here's the thing, like, from a scientific standpoint, there's just not enough research done. But like,
Yeah.
even if you go to like the Mayo Clinic, it's like, it may do this, it may do this, it may do this. And it's a laundry list of like good stuff. And so you're just going, man, I'm just gonna live forever on holy basil. Like, this stuff will cure cancer. I don't
Hey, keep it going. Do what you can.
That's right. But anyway, I'm over here sipping on my tea, going, I talk about my tea. Oh man. So so anyway, we have a question. We had a call-in question, and then again, for those of you, and here, let me get to that again. Let me see, where's my number at? There it is. So for those of you that'd like to call in to ask your own question, you can call in at 727-474-0542. That number again is 727-474-0542. With that being said, we have a question tonight, and at least in the voicemail, they did not tell me not to play their voice. So I'm going to play it. I'm going to play the voicemail. So here we go.
How should we view and regard the Jewish descendants and the established nation of Israel today versus before the new covenant was established between God and man through Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago? Thank you.
All right. So there's the question. There's the question we have for today, for tonight, for whenever it is that you're listening. So, and to be fair, this is actually a really big question. And the reason that it's really big, especially right now, especially as we look at for instance, the Iranian war, and we see, of course, Israel being a nation, kind of going forward and doing some of these attacks and all this kind of stuff. And there are some people that will argue that if you attack Israel, you are actually attacking the chosen people of God. And so their rationale is that the covenant that God made with the Jewish people has never officially ended. And therefore, the Jewish people are still, in fact, the chosen people of God. And you can get into some of this with dispensationalism. They get into this. They talk about the end of what's known as the diaspora. these Jews that are kind of scattered everywhere, and how they're all going to be kind of collected back together in a sense at some point in time. And you see some faiths that will make this argument that a nation of Israel just absolutely has to exist for the end of time, like for Jesus to return. We need certain prophetic texts to come about, including the end of the diaspora and all the Jews to come together in a nation of Israel. Okay. So notice I said some, others,
Right.
yada, yada, yada. Notice I didn't say we believe. So I tried to choose my words a little correctly anyway, or a little, very specifically, I guess would be the answer there. The reality is that, like, there's some truth to it, right? Like, there will be a time when God gathers all the people, all of his people, his chosen people, to be with him for all of eternity. And we know that is absolutely positively true. It is not necessarily with the Jews of old, or the ethnic Jews, if you will. And I understand there's a lot of confusion with that. And when we come upon this, it can muddy the water a lot, and it can actually get very, very confusing. But a couple different responses. First of all, God can do what God does, which is to say that if God wants to end the diaspora and bring all the Jews together and thus end, this world and return, he can do that, and he doesn't need our help. I think sometimes we forget that. Sometimes we think like we have to go save the nation of Israel because, it's God's will to do so, because if we don't, we're, I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking, but like at the end of the day, God is God, and us establishing a nation of Israel, or us trying to gather all these people together, that is not necessarily going to be ushering in of the end times. Mm-hmm. And God can do what he does, and he can do what he wants. So first of all, let's get that off the table, because that shouldn't be a stressor of ours. Sometimes I think we as Christians confuse our work with God's work. God says he's going to do certain things, and then we go, okay, so we should like work on doing that, right? Like, so this is like the Abraham and Hagar story, right? All over again. Abraham's old, Sarah's old, Sarah doesn't think she's going to have a kid. So she sends Abraham in with Hagar, or Hagar, and, and they could even have a child. And like the whole thing is like, well, okay, well, God just promised me a child. I guess this is what I got to do, and it's like, right. No, God's going to do what God does. Don't feel like you got to help him. If we spent that much time instead of focusing on how we should act with Israel and how we should act with this and how we should act with that, if we spent all that time and energy instead on just saying, how are we going to tell other people about Jesus, we would do so much better, because that is commanded in scripture, that we actually tell other people about Jesus. Like that's a huge part of what we're called to do. And that's the thing that we tend to be the most shy about doing. We'll get online and hem and haw about the nation of Israel and then fail to tell our neighbors about Jesus. That's a problem.
Yes. So, yeah. Well, I think it's easier to go off on a political thing or on Israel or whatever it is. It's a lot easier to do that than it is to convincingly talk to people about Jesus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when people who don't want to hear it from you. That's, nerve-wracking.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I see a lot of people online in general who they seem to be always ranting about whatever political thing is going on, which I understand if you're upset about something or something's, but then at least for me, whenever I do make a post, which is rare, I don't do it that often, but it always is centered. I've consciously decided I'm not going to post really directly about a political party and what's right or wrong between the two. It's always directed at like, here's this issue everybody's arguing about, but aren't like us as Christians, we should be just, doing this. And I'm never really talking about like, well, Republicans are right or Democrats are right. Yeah. I'm never really going into that stuff. It's always, if I'm going to post something, again, which is rare when it comes to hot topics, I really try to only do it if it's something I feel like would be beneficial to spread the word of God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I'm not perfect.
No.
I don't mean to, I'm not trying to sound like, oh, I'm so great. That's not what I mean, but it's just, I just see a lot of people who I know who are like really devout Christians who all they do is post politically and they get angry and they're cursing at people in the comments. And I'm sitting there going like, what are you doing? Stop. This isn't what you're supposed to be doing. So
one of the things that I talked this weekend, this past Sunday, we talked to the high school kids. I talked to the high school kids, and I've been doing a series of like current events with the youth, just kind of talking about various things and all that. And I don't remember exactly how we did it, but we ended up getting into the conversation. And it's probably my own fault because honestly, a lot of times the kids don't talk. They'll poke around and ask a question here or there, but or make a statement. But honestly, a lot of times it's just me talking and stream of conscience, whatever. But one of the things that I mentioned was that like a lot of times we end up on the same side with somebody, but for completely different reasons. And that's why politics can sometimes be dangerous, because it kind of goes like this. And I was talking about, for instance, one of the things that happened, oh gosh, what, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I don't even remember when, but when they legalized homosexual marriage. And I said, if you read enough Republicans, from their standpoint, like their argument is not that it's immoral or it's against scripture. It's like, that's where I stand. As a Christian, that's my view. Right. I believe it's sinful. I believe that the Bible speaks clearly against it. I said, don't get me wrong. They'll make those kind of arguments and claims, but that's because they know the people they're talking to. But if you really read a lot of their documentation, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the tax breaks, that they give to married people, they want to give to people that will potentially produce productive members of society, which ultimately becomes man and woman. And so it doesn't make any sense to give a tax break, i.e. marriage, stuff. It doesn't make any sense to give that to people that are of the same sex, since they can't have little babies. And so really the argument is, who will produce, productive citizens, of our country versus who will not. And again, if you really read their stuff, that's actually a lot of how their thinking is. But notice how different that is than mine. Mine is that, no, this is sinful. Now, I can see their logic, and I can still go, okay, they have some logic there that goes with it, sure. But at the end of the day, like, even if it came out that, like, some of these families were producing great and wonderful and productive members of society, my answer is still, well, it's still sinful. So it doesn't matter. And so, I mean, again, it's one of those things where it is a little dangerous to lump yourself together with a political party. Like a lot of times you end up at the same place, but the way they ended up there and the way you ended up there are two different things. Mm-hmm. And if you don't recognize that, you can find yourself falling into a different kind of trap, I guess you might say.
Oh yeah. Well, and recently I've had some people that, I agree with them on something, but their reasoning for it is a lot more hateful than mine. And then you kind of go, whoa, okay, that's not what I was saying. It's like, and that's a little freaky. And then of course, what the others, then we, as if you put it as teams and everybody, you break everything down to, well, everybody thinks this one thing about this one subject. Then everybody goes, well, you're so hateful. And it's like, that's not how everybody views it, and I understand that there are definitely people who do, but it's just, I don't know. It's just a very difficult thing when you take sides and there's not a lot of discussion around it.
Well, that's just always true. For sure that is true.
Yeah.
But yeah. So now the other part of this though is again kind of getting back to the question. I know we've kind of ventured off into a different world, but kind of going all the way back to the question that was at hand. The other side of this is that, like, at least from a Lutheran perspective, I can tell you that the texts that point together of a reunification of the nation of Israel really did, take place in the Ezra Nehemiah text, and where he's together and they have members from all the tribes. Now it's not really potent or powerful. That is to say, a lot of people want this to be some big ta-da, and it's not. It's like a whisper in the wind kind of thing. It's like they're all there, and it's kind of almost sad because it's not quite what they were thinking it was going to be. They're still kind of looking to a future. There is still some textual indication that there is some form of a restoration of Israel, but again, I'll talk about that here in just a second. You see this with the disciples, right? Right before Jesus ascends into heaven, he's walking in the book of Acts. He's walking by Jerusalem, and the disciples ask him, are you now going to restore Jerusalem? And like they're asking, and it's one of those things where we can dismiss it and we can say, oh, that's just another dumb, disciples question, like they don't get it, yada yada yada. But the reality is that like this is right after 40 days of Jesus opening their mind to Holy Scripture. And this is the question we have in our text. So we do pay attention to it. It is a good question. So there is going to be some kind of restoration, but then we go to the book of Revelation and we go, okay, well, the restoration is going to be kind of, dare I say, the heavenly one of sorts. Where the new heavens and the new earth are revealed, and you see a restoration not just of Israel and Jerusalem, but in fact of the whole earth. But it's a new heavens and it's a new earth. But one of the things that I'd like to point out, and I've talked at least briefly about this here and there, but this is just so important to understand. From a theological framework, everything in the Old Testament points forward to the New Testament. And everything in the New Testament kind of points forward as well. And so it's like everything is kind of, I don't want to say bigger and better, although that's kind of true, but I think it's just it's more poignant. Like all the theology is all still there. But so for instance, what is Israel always going towards, right? They're in the wilderness. They're there for 40 years and Moses came. Where is they going? They're going to the promised land. And so everything becomes this big deal about like land theology and this land that God promised them. And they're always going to the land, or they're getting kicked out of the land, or they're being exiled from the land, but now they're returning to the land. And it's like, so everything seems to hover around this land, and this land theology. And we really don't have that. And yet we do at the same time, but it's different. We don't have like some nation on earth that we look to and go, well, that's our promised land right there. But we do have a new heavens and a new earth, and we know that that is our promised land. And think about like all the things that are said about the promised land. It's a place flowing with milk and honey. It's it's a paradise, really, and that's what they're looking forward to as they head into their promised land, given by God. And so it is that when we look forward to our new heavens and our new earth, we also look for a world filled with, dare I say, flowing with milk and honey, right? There's no sin, there's no evil, there's no nighttime, because the Lord is always present and he's always lighting it. And you have us New Jerusalem. John describes a New Jerusalem, descending down from heaven. And so, you put all that together. And then on top of that, if you go back to the book of Romans, Paul flat out talks about how, it's not so much about your lineage, which is ultimately what the idea of ethnic Judaism is all about. It's all about your marital heritage, your bloodline, and all that kind of stuff. But instead, he says it's all those that share in the faith that Abraham had. And so Abraham had faith. He had faith, and it was counted to him as righteousness. And we know that those that are saved are ones who have the faith in the Lord, who put their faith in Jesus. And so the faith is what makes you an inheritor, not necessarily your bloodline.
Yeah.
So I know that's, again, that can all be very, very confusing, especially in a world where we have a lot of people that they're called, I guess you'd call them Zionists, but they very much believe like we have to reestablish the nation of Israel, and it's going to usher in the end times. And it's like, look, God's going to usher in the end times when he wants. It's his time frame. We can't rush it. There's nothing we can do.
Right.
So anyway, there's the much longer answer.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a pretty important thing to discuss right now, because I've told you, and I think I might have said on the last podcast maybe, but I have some people I know that they are really, really heavily into this like anti-Semitic, all the Jews are evil, and it's really a kind of a scary thing to me to hear, because I'm not necessarily like I'm not like you were saying. I haven't really viewed it as we have to protect Israel to do God's will or anything like that. But it is scary to me when people are so riddled, or it's so easy to come out of their mouth that like all Jews are all this, all the Jews are this, and they're all doing, they're all evil. They're all like, that scares me when it's that easy for someone to say that type of thing.
Oh, for sure.
Without even a thought, and it's just, it's scary to me, because
and again, realize that everything we're saying, none of it is or should be taken in any form of anti-Semitic light, right? Like,
right.
We as people do not have to establish the nation of Israel, because that's God's job. That's what God, if that's what God wants to do, then God's going to do it, and there's nothing we can do to get in the way of that. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that we go against the nation of Israel either. It means that we get to actually take a step back and go, okay, is Israel doing the right thing? Are they doing the wrong thing? And by the way, not everybody, just like America, not everybody in Israel agrees with everything that Israel is doing. And not every, person of Jewish faith, thinks and agrees with everything going one way or the other. And it's like, it's just, look, these are people, they're human beings. Like, they have thoughts. And that, again, honestly, the whole anti-Semitic thing, it does scare me. It frightens me partially because I just honestly, like, growing up, like that would have been unheard of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you never would have heard someone talking like that. And so it's crazy. Because, I mean, Nazis was still such a thing to say, like, oh, like how horrible the Nazis were and stuff. But yet there's people right now that I know who are saying stuff that, like, word for word what, the Nazi regime was saying. And so that's what's crazy to me. That's like, how did we come so far that we just we're saying these things? And like, I don't know. There was I'm sorry, I'm taking this into an avenue that I'm sure you're not expecting.
Is it the there is position?
No. But there was an actor about a couple years ago who got in trouble because he was talking about, he wanted to, I understand, because he's, trying to make a buck, he goes to Comic-Cons, he's got, a fan base. They're probably not going to buy a history book, but they'll buy t-shirts, right? So his thought was he was going to make t-shirts with all these quotes from different historical people, and he's a history guy, so he finds this stuff fascinating. So one of the things he mentioned was that Hitler was he says, quote for quote, or line for line, that Hitler was a demon on acid, but he had some pretty good one-liners. And that blew up. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, this guy's like, they tried to twist this into like 100 different ways, saying he's racist or all this stuff. But he's just like a history guy. And honestly, I've actually heard from people that he just like, he felt really stupid after he said it. Like, that was really dumb. I was just talking, and I said something stupid. But the thing is, like, that was a few years ago, and people are freaking out about it and trying to like cancel this guy for saying that. And now there's people who are literally saying like Hitler quotes, like, what a hero. And I'm like, wow, that's scary.
The kind of Spanish Inquisition. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Sorry, it took me a while to get it, but there you go.
Oh yeah, that one lined up.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. I'm sorry for interrupting, but I couldn't help it.
That's okay. That's okay. But I don't know. I don't know. To be honest, I'm just kind of scared of it. It's kind of freaky to me. I have, I have family members who were, I have part of my family came over from Austria after World War II. So to me, it was always a very scary thing because they actually experienced what it was like to see this whole thing happen and how evil it was. And to see friends of theirs be taken, and it's so, I don't know. It's just crazy when I hear people talking like that. Cause I don't think they truly understand what they're proposing,
Well, again, it is a wild thing. Like I think about that, like with, in 2014, when all the riots broke out in St. Louis. And, I remember watching that. I remember sitting in my parents' house watching that, just going, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy." And part of the thing that was so crazy about it was the fact that like there were people that were just completely and utterly racist, like, on the prowl there. Like, here you had Ferguson erupted and it erupted in all the wrong ways. And and then you had these other people like kind of start chiming in. And they were complete racist bigots, like, and I'm not talking about like the politicians and stuff, like those guys always guard their speech. I'm talking about whoever it was, like I watched a few videos and it was just like they were so public about it. And then I was like, well, they're going to get shot down. And like, no, they weren't. Instead, people were like, yeah, I kind of agree with this guy. And I'm just going, are you insane?
Yeah.
Like, again, I grew up in the 90s. It was, and I mean, look, I'm not saying the 90s were like the greatest time ever. They weren't. But at the same time, like, dude, if you said something racist, like you were like outcast, like,
oh yeah.
And I didn't exactly go, I knew that a lot of people probably heard it in their homes, in high school and stuff, but they certainly didn't say it openly. They certainly didn't talk like that openly. And it's like, just what a completely different world to live in, where people could be openly anti-Semitic and openly, in essence, actually racist, just completely open about it.
Yeah.
And just so we're very clear here, like realize, like from a scriptural standpoint, that is utterly condemned. Like, no, we don't got time for that. Like, and I love Martin Luther King Jr., like his quotes and the one that everybody gets quoted around. But it's so true. Like, judge somebody based on the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And it's just so true. Like, you're going to have people that have great content of character, and you're going to have people that have bad content of character. And, the color of their skin's got nothing to do with it. Like, you just got some people that are just bad people and some people that are good people.
Yeah. And unfortunately, being a good or bad person, I think that's a completely different factor into a person. There's nothing like, there's not, oh, well, they're a Christian, so they're just not a bad person. No, there's some bad Christians out there,
for sure there are.
Or they're Muslim, so they're a bad person. No, there's some really nice, good Muslim people out there. There's some bad ones too, but it's this weird thing that I feel like I'm seeing a lot, where people are trying to just put everybody into a category of like good or bad. And it's like, people who are, in the LGBTQ community, they're all good people. No, some of them are really nasty, awful people. Some of them are good people.
Yeah.
I don't agree with their lifestyle, but they're really good people, nice people, respectful people. And it's just, I don't know. It's funny that being a good or bad person is people are trying to set that as like, that only belongs to one side, one party, or one political or one religious belief, or not religious belief. It's funny to me because I'm like, no, there's good and bad people of all, everywhere, in every organization, in every religious, situation. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, again, it's a good reminder, even on our side, especially now that you're LCMS Lutheran.
That's right.
To remind you and to remind everybody that, like, church is a hospital for sinners, right? Like it's we're not coming to church because we're so great. We're coming to church because we recognize that we are sinners. We want to do better. We try to do better. We fail all the time. But if you come to church expecting to see a sinless place, you're sorely mistaken. It's like trying to go to a hospital to seek only the people that are really healthy and good, doing good. Like, well, maybe if their patient has a visitor, but by and large, but and again, it's one of those things, like, we believe some of these other people are sinners, and since we're all sinners, none of us are going to be good enough to earn salvation or earn heaven. And that's the sad thing, is that there's a lot of people that believe they are. There's a lot of people that have false religions, false gods that give them false hopes. And that's really sad. And so on the one hand, we could say there's no good person, and that's true. On the other hand, we can at least say, like, hey, we kind of want to be able to, preach the gospel to people, to tell people about Jesus. And we hope we get the opportunity. And some people are going to let us, and some people aren't. You get some of the fear about some of these cultures and some of these things, but you're absolutely right. Like, good and bad, as judged by basically whether or not that person wants to harm others, themselves, or you, versus not so good people.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I don't know. Sorry, my brain's kind of going off on another thought, but I don't think that it's that relevant to what we're talking about. Yeah. Well, I don't know if there's anything else to really say about it besides,
Well, it's a good talk. It was a good discussion.
Yeah.
So,
and clean your algorithms. That's what I'm going to harp on.
Clean your algorithms.
I got to be honest. Even this week, I was scrolling through Facebook and I was like, "Oh, I need to start cleaning up my algorithm again." It was like, man, it's just like everything's negative, everything's nasty.
Yeah.
So, and even some of it's political stuff I agree with, but it's kind of like, yeah, but they're presenting it, like, this person in particular is presenting this stuff in kind of an arrogant way, and I don't really like it.
Yeah.
Even though I may agree with them, and so I'm just like, I gotta start, like I said, you can unfollow pages, you can say you don't want it to recommend, but if it's like putting you in a bad place,
Absolutely.
in the morning, you're sitting on the toilet and you're scrolling through, getting angry, foaming at the mouth because you can't understand why this stuff in the world is happening. It's like, clean your social media up if you're doing that. I really highly recommend it.
Absolutely. So. That's right. Getting angry. Yeah. Are we ready to move on to our next segment?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, here we go.
Welcome now to Saints in the Shadows. Hear the stories of the saints. Learn about things you never knew. See if you can figure out who the saint is before the end.
All right. Well, this one is a little past due because I had it ready to go for last week, and that didn't happen. So, but I did promise you that if for this week, we'd have one that was a little easy. And so here you go. Saints in the Shadows. The Silent Guardian. Before the songs and stained glass, before the nativity scenes and carpenter's bench souvenirs, there lived a man who carried greatness in his arms, but never once proclaimed it in writings or speeches. In fact, not one word of his has survived. No speeches, no prayers, no recorded dialogue, only deeds. And that, perhaps, is tonight why we will call him quietly, reverently, the Silent Guardian. He lived in a small village with a large history. Nazareth wasn't much to look at, just a scatter of limestone homes and dusty lanes. A place the big cities mocked. Yet it was here that the Silent Guardian worked with saw, chisel, and plane. His hands were the kind that remembered every splinter. His muscles learned patience. His work was honest, steady, and rarely noticed. People knew him as a righteous man, but not the brittle kind of righteousness, the kind that snaps when bent. No, he was a flexible righteousness, warmed by mercy. That mercy would soon matter, for one day word reached him, word that should have broken him. His betrothed, Mary, was with child. Not his, not possible, not explainable. In that world, such news could destroy a woman. As the silent guardian had every legal right, every social expectation to expose her. He chose not to. He resolved, quietly, deliberately, to protect her from shame, to release her gently, quietly. No drama, no accusation, just kindness. But that night, sleep brought more than a rest. A messenger of God spoke to him, not with riddles, but with clarity. Do not fear to take her into your home. The child is holy. The child is entrusted to you, entrusted to him. A craftsman from a small town? A man whose greatest possession was a good name and a good heart? But the silent guardian didn't argue. He didn't protest. His greatness was not in what he said, but in what he did the next morning. He took Mary as his wife, and with her, the task of raising a child who was older than creation. That kind of responsibility could crush a man. It refined him instead. There came a decree from Caesar Augustus. Registrations, travel, disruption. The silent guardian led Mary south, mile after mile, to David's city, Bethlehem. No room, no welcome, only a stable, only straw. And in that lowly place he held the child for the first time. The hands that shaped wood now cradled the word made flesh. But the peace didn't last. Another dream, another warning, another command, acted on without hesitation. Herod wanted the child dead. The silent guardian rose before dawn, packed what little he owned, lifted the child, steadied Mary, and led them into the night, into Egypt, no less. The land of Israel's ancient oppressors became the sanctuary for its Messiah. And still the silent guardian said nothing. He simply kept the child alive. Years later, when the danger had died with Herod, he brought the family back to Nazareth. When the boy was 12, they traveled to Jerusalem for Passover. On the road back, the child was missing. Panic surged. They retraced every step. 3 torturous days later, they found him in the temple, speaking with scholars who marveled at his words. Mary spoke. Jesus spoke. Scholars spoke. The silent guardian listened. He lived his whole life in that posture, attentive, ready, steady. Scripture grows quiet about him after that. Most believe that he died before Jesus began his public ministry. We might wish we had more stories, more truths about the silent guardian, but one truth matters. He disappeared from the stage the moment his task was complete. As the child grew in wisdom and stature, the silent guardian faded, content to diminish, content to be remembered not for himself, but for the one he had protected, taught, and loved. That is a strange heroism in a world that rewards noise. For all his silence, all his hiddenness, all his lack of recorded speech or dramatic miracles, the church across the ages and continents came to revere him, not as a man overshadowed, but as a man entrusted with the most delicate, impossible vocation, to be the earthly protector of the Son of God. The church calls him guardian, because that is what he was. Not a talker, not a fighter, not a king, a guardian. And this silent guardian, of course, had a name whispered in stables, a name carved into chapels and cradles and hearts. His name was Joseph, husband of Mary, guardian of Jesus. Saint Joseph, the guardian of Jesus. And that's actually typically the title of the day. Now, it's typically celebrated on March 19th, which would have been, last week, last Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, yeah. I think. So that's typically when you would celebrate St. Joseph the Guardian. He's almost always overshadowed by St. Patrick because everybody thinks about St. Patrick.
Well, St. Patrick has a gimmick. He's got
the gimmick.
He's got the whole getting slosh thing. So
yeah, well, he's got that. So, but anyway, but he, this is actually kind of an interesting thing, but this was actually kind of a big deal. Like, Saint Joseph, the Guardian, is celebrated on all calendars, and it is, in both of my books. Like I said, I usually look up like Drinking with the Saints and Dining with the Saints. He's mentioned in both of them.
Oh, wow.
And usually it's somebody like St. Patrick that gets both days, but he actually got both days. The drink they had is called the Sazerac. I'm not going to give you the full directions because, again, copyright infringement, but it has absinthe, simple syrup, rye whiskey, and bitters with a lemon twist. Spelled Sazerac. So the Sazerac. You can go ahead and look that up if you would like. It is a legit recipe. And then the other one is actually interesting as well. The dish, if you will, that they have is called St. Joseph's bread. And the reason that they have St. Joseph's bread is because St. Joseph is during Lent, but unlike St. Patrick, it's not considered like a high festival day. And so the fast that normally accompanies Lent is still in effect. And for a lot of people, that means no meat. And so there's a specific type of bread that you can make to celebrate St. Joseph's Day, and it's just called St. Joseph's bread. So you can look that up and make a recipe and make a batch of it, however you see fit, and and kind of enjoy that. Again, we're kind of past the day, I know, but again, I couldn't help it. Again, it was just too. In my eyes, it was kind of too big to kind of just completely skip. So I wanted to kind of bring it. And this is also the one I wrote about and published in the written Parishscope, by the way. So you may have read it already, although in the written edition, I don't think it has the drink or the recipe in there. So, yeah, then there's that.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, let me ending music.
And so it ends. The light shines in the shadow. And now you know more about the story of one of the saints of history.
All right. Yeah. And so we only got 2 more segments to go. So here, let me do this one. Oh, good. I hit the right button. I'm always a little worried.
And it's time for Lectionary Loop and our look at the upcoming lectionary texts.
So obviously this Sunday is a big Sunday. It is Palm Sunday, and that actually marks the very beginning of Holy Week. It marks the very beginning as we kind of march into Holy Week. And Holy Week is got a lot of significant elements to it. So for one, in most services, you probably can't say the quote unquote A word, Alleluia. There, I said it. Oh my goodness. You usually reserve that and you hold that off for Easter. And where that tradition came from is that in the ancient church, they would stop and cease saying that word during Holy Week. But you see, that was back in the day whenever they had church, sometimes multiple times a day. And so it was expected that like that would actually be noticeable to say, oh, we can't say that word now, even, during the week. And so that was actually something that was only done during Holy Week. We do it during all of Easter now, or all of Lent now, kind of to emphasize it because people aren't going to church every single day. But that being said, it's just significant. We're marching into Holy Week, which is kind of the final journey. Throughout this Lenten period, we've been following Jesus on this path that's leading to the cross. And now we get to his entrance into Jerusalem. And so we have a couple different passages that we're going to look at. The one processional text that is read, I won't say everywhere, but a lot of places, comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 12, and it's like it's verses like 12 to 19, and it's basically the process in as he's heading into Jerusalem. Now you have some bonus texts that you can read as well. You can finish that up and do John 12, 20 to 43. You can do, there's a couple different Matthew passages that you can do. But basically the focus for today is really kind of wrapped up in this Philippians text, because our epistle lesson is Philippians 2 verses 5 through 11. And the verse there, specifically verse 6, talking about Jesus, and it says, who thought he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking on the form of a servant, born in the likeness of men. And, these passages talk about the humility that Jesus had. And that's really the focus. As you enter into Holy Week, we focus in on the humility that Jesus had. That Jesus, though he was higher than the angels, made himself lower. That he was God himself, allowed himself to be put into a position where he could ultimately, he could be put to death. In death upon a cross, even though he didn't deserve it. And so basically the whole movement of this whole lectionary, if you will, is all about showing the humility of Jesus Christ as he marches into Jerusalem. So there you go. There's your lectionary loop. There we go. I'm going to get the words out one day. So
very nice.
Oh, there you go. All right. Do you have anything to add to that, or are we ready to go all the way into our next section?
I think we're ready to go into the next section.
Oh man, it's the last section.
To our last segment, probably.
All right. Are we ready for church chatter? We're ready. We're ready for church chatter. So again, the biggest thing for us right now is obviously we have our Easter breakfast. We have all these Easter things coming up. I'm sure you do too. I know our service times, we won't have any. We'll have 8 and 10:45 on Sunday. And then on Monday, Thursday, we're going to have noon and 7 p.m. We also have a Seder meal that takes place in between there from 4:30, usually until about 6:30ish. And so we have that going on. And then on Good Friday, we have a noon and 7 p.m. service. On Easter Saturday, our Holy Saturday, we have our Easter Vigil. That's at 6 o'clock. Now, we're actually doing a special prayer vigil afterwards. We're going to have some prayer sheets ready. We're going to have a sign-up sheet ready for people to sign up to come into church and pray. I'm really actually excited about this. We've done prayer vigils in the past, but it's been a while, and this one is just so perfect. Right there on that Easter Vigil service, which is honestly what that night is all about. And honestly, it was also about baptism in the ancient days, but that's a different story. And then, of course, we have our Easter sunrise at 6 a.m. Again, going to be kind of a special service this year, and I'm looking forward to it. We did something a few years back, and we're going to do it again. So I'm actually pretty stoked about that. And then we have our 8 a.m. Easter service, and then our 10:45 Easter service. And then we have my nap time, which is going to take place after that. It'll be awesome. It's going to be pretty fantastic. But anyway, in between all those, we're going to have Easter breakfast. So yeah, we're going to be good to go. That's kind of all the big news going on, because that's a lot. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you're like crap. I don't know. Like our schedule for everything exactly. But we'll have Palm Sunday, of course. We have Monday, Thursday service, 6:30, a 6:30 service for Good Friday as well. And then of course our Easter services. 6:30 p.m. That's what it had. At least that's what's listed on our website there. So I hope that's correct.
Making sure. Is.
So yeah. That's what we'll be up to.
Right on. Oh man. So no, that's fantastic. You guys have anything else going on over that way?
No. I mean, I don't. Did I share the guitar story yet? Did I just talk to you beforehand?
I don't think you did.
It was the shot heard around the world. I'm sure you guys heard it over there.
We probably did. We just didn't know what it was.
Yeah, but my guitar fell off my strap this Sunday. Fell, and the bottom of it is where like the electronic pack is. It's kind of like drilled in, put into the wood, and it hit right on a mic stand and busted a hole straight through my guitar, like straight through the back of it. Oh man! Which I just want to say, I've played guitar for many years, but I always had really, really crappy guitars.
Yeah,
because I didn't feel like I was good enough to really have one. And so when I started at St. John's, it was like my excuse of I really could use a nice guitar. So I bought this guitar. So it's like the guitar I've played for, besides like a couple, one or like two or three at the beginning of working at St. John's, it's like the guitar I've played for every service for, I was at St. John's 3.5 years, been here about 2 years. It's like over, 5+ years now.
Yeah.
So it was like, oh man. So I was honestly a little emotional.
Yeah.
I was like,
one would be. Yeah.
I'm not going to cry, but I was getting emotional. And so I played piano, but then one of our other new members, he came up to me and said, I'm a carpenter by trade. And so he asked if he could fix it for me. And I was like, please do. Because the only other thought I was like, I guess I could maybe check like Guitar Center or something, or see if I don't think there's anything they'd be able to do. And then I actually found out on Sunday night that apparently that it closed in Peoria. So I'm like, well, I guess it's a good thing I didn't plan on taking it there. But yeah, I mean, right? So we'll see. I'm hopefully I'm going to get it back and everything's going to be fine. But oh man, I tell you what, it was a little emotional on Sunday for me. I felt
that's a lot of emotion going on there.
I mean, it's like it's my guitar. It's I've done all these years with it, and to lose it, oh man. So I'm not a sentimental person, but I do still have the same drum set I started with. So I'm just, I don't know. I guess I just have this thing I can't let go. So,
there you go.
Yeah. So that's the big news.
That's huge. It's huge news. Huge news coming out of our Savior.
Yeah. Big news.
All right. So that's all that I have for tonight. And once we're ready to close out, I'm going to hit one of these buttons. I think I hit a button once. And anyway, I'm gonna so I'm just gonna hit a button and see what happens.
All right, let's see.
Okay, so anyway, so goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Yep.